This is Panic Consulting's ArcGIS workshop. I'm Frank Conkling, and today what we're going to do is we're going to look at easing the transition from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro. Interesting, we're still getting clients who are trying to make this transition and struggling with it, and this is not going to be a thorough deep dive, but it's going to show you some of the more important things you want to go and look at as you're making this transition. So, topics we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the ribbon interface, the differences in that, the approach of projects versus map documents, and what you need to think about when you're going through that, some of the hardware and licensing differences, some change geoprocessing tools. We're going to talk about data differences. There are a couple things, especially if you are a Kogo user. And if you use annotation, you have to be aware of these things. And then finally, we'll talk about scripting language differences. And again, not necessarily go deep into them, but just point out the fact that there are differences now, and you want to sort of start setting yourself up to learn some of these new ones. So starting out, I was thinking about this recently because for the first time in over 20 years, my wife and I bought a new car. Still have the old one. It's an old 2005 Sequoia, Toyota Sequoia. It's got two, yeah, it's got almost 200,000 miles on it. Still runs great. Still is great. We're all very comfortable with it. But we went out and we bought a brand new 2026 Grand Highlander. And I got thinking about the changes that we've experienced just by moving from 20-year-old technology into current day technology, because it's a little disconcerting. It's not a direct replacement for driving, but it's enhancements, it's changes, it's interfaces. And I thought this was a perfect metaphor for what others are experiencing as we're moving from ArcMap into ArcGIS Pro. By the way, ArcMap is well over 20 years old. It's 25 years old or so now. I remember when we first went into that, that was a little disconcerting. ArcGIS Pro, by the way, is now 10 years old. It's hard to believe, but it's been 10 years since the first release of it. And again, I think this was a really good metaphor because even something as simple as the instrumentation, what you interact with, there's such a huge difference between 20-year-old technology and current technology. It does the same thing. You get in, you start the vehicle, you drive somewhere, it gets you to the destination. And it's the same way with ArcMap. It would go and get you to the destination, but you had to know what you were doing in order to go and be successful with it. And many of us, I would say most of us, learned enough that we could be at least successful. Not real efficient, but we would be successful. We learned those parts that we needed to learn. And it's the same way with the instrumentation in the Sequoia. It was enough to get us by, but there were a lot of things that were missing. When I look at some of the new instrumentation in the vehicles, the Grand Highlander, it was extremely disconcerting for a week or so, just getting in there. Things like A, you don't have a key. B, you get preset chair settings. There's things like um, on with headlights. I don't turn on the headlights anymore in the vehicle. It has automatic sensing on there because it's got cameras everywhere. It knows when it's dark enough to have the lights on. It knows whether or not it should use a low beam or a high beam on there. It has cruise control. It has adaptive cruise control. So things like if I get too close to a car in front of me, it automatically slows it down. Things like that. Things that are meant to help you do your job better without having to become an expert in it. That's exactly the approach that Pro is taking. It's taking what was the fundamentals of GIS and GIS software and improving them. It's changing the way we look at what it is, and it's attempting to go and help us to do our jobs better and more efficient than what we were doing before in ArcMap. And that's really the gist of why there's this change. It does more with less effort on our part. All right. So let's look in. What's the first change? The first change is the ribbon interface. And the ribbon interface inside of ArcGIS Pro follows basically the ArcMap, or excuse me, not the ArcMap, follows basically the Microsoft standards in that it has a series of tabs across the top. These tabs here, 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 all the way across the top, group the commands and the interface that you're going to be working with according to that function that you're trying to do. When you're trying to go and create a map, you go and use the map tab. If you want to do some analysis, you go into the analysis tab or the edit tab, or if you're dealing and looking to share the information from others, you do that. And it's a good introduction if you don't know what you're doing. It's a good way to go and get you acclimated to this new interface and where things are. Unfortunately, what happens is once you get past that initial learning curve, it becomes a little bit more onerous to go and work around it. For example, I'm going to pull up ArcGIS Pro right now, and I see that this is the interface. It's got all of these tabs on there. And again, there's a project tab, and there's a map tab, and insert if I want to insert something, or analysis, or if I want to create specific types of views on here, what I want to see here, and edit and imagery and such. And it becomes helpful to discover. It sort of allows you to go and test and see what you're trying to do. In addition, it has things that ArcMap never had. For example, it has searches for commands. If you're looking for a specific command, all you can do is just type that command in or type that function that you're trying to do, hit return, and it will show you whether or not there's anything out there. Let's do something I know, the Traverse tool. All right. And the Traverse tool will allow you to go and look for that. By the way, I just I this is ArcGIS Pro 3.6.2, and it's the first time I'm using it. So it'll allow you to go and do that. I can also go to, for example, to a modify pane. If I'm looking at editing, all my tools are in one place. So I can go to my modify tool and look for the specific tools I'm looking for, and it will do the same sort of thing. Show me where these tools are and what tools do traverses and what tools do splits or divides, things of that sort. So it's got a built-in help system that helps you figure out where things are and how to go and do things. There's also, for example, context sensitive, so that as I'm working with this, and you could see the beginning of this inside of ArcMap. If I go over something and select something with my cursor and I right click on it, that shows me all the things that I can do with that. And it's the same way with ArcGIS Pro. As I'm on here, I can see I can add data, I can set reference scales, I can view my metadata of this, I can save it as a map file. If I switch over to something else, for example, a layer that's in my map, I can go and see that thing, like open up the attribute table and things of that sort. So this is like the Sequoia. There's a similarity to it. It kind of looks the same, but there's a little bit of differences. And that's where a lot of people just have a struggle with it. But overall, it works pretty much the same. But it's the interface that you've got to get used to. And one of the things that is great in that there is well, let's go and look at this here. Once you get used to it, there's certain portions in this ribbon that you want to get used to. One, the fact that you've got overall this ribbon area, and then you've got this thing called a quick access toolbar. Well, that quick access toolbar, if you're trying to make the transition from ArcMap into Pro, that's one of the secrets, because that allows you to go and create a toolbar of your custom tools, what you use all the time. So you can create your own custom toolbar and help you to go and do that. And if you notice on my ArcGIS Pro, I actually have a toolbar here with all the commands that I use all the time. And if I go to the end of that, I can actually go and say customize my quick access toolbar, and it will pull up a list of all of the popular commands, all of the commands. And I can do a search for a specific command. And when I find that command, let's just choose something else. Let's look at the popular commands here and look, let's say I have delete features. Let's say I wanted to go and delete something. I could go over here to my toolbar. Actually, I have it here. And I can say, well, let's just go and take it and move it over there. And I can, if it's something I don't have on my tab already, let me do, I can remove that, and then I can go and take that and add it back there, and it will add it here. I can move it up, and I can create this whole customized command toolbar for me that allows me to go and see exactly what tools I'm looking for. Secondly, that allows me to go and show it either above the ribbon, or as I move here, I can show it below the ribbon. Again, I tend to prefer below the ribbon. The ribbon, again, you can also go, and if I click over here, I can see the classic, I can see a simplified ribbon. I can hide the ribbon and show only the tabs on here. There's all sorts of things that I can do to go and make it easier to go and interact. It's customizable for you. It's going to try to help you work as you go through here. Again, there is these tab groups. You want to recognize that they try to go and make it as similar as possible to the Microsoft standard, and they're going to go and look at general grouping of there. So as we look at the general interface, there are some custom things that you want to do. Excuse me, I take that back. It's not custom, just standardized things. If I wish to go and refresh my display, that's now shown on the lower right corner of my overall display. That's shown right down here. There is my refresh on my display. When I click that, it will go and refresh it. And it's similar to the globe that we used to have. And the globe doesn't spin anymore. Instead, we get this circle here to go and help us. Project files. And this is one of those things that it's a little disconcerting. In fact, that we're used in ArcMap to go in using a single map document. And you may wind up having 3 or 4 or 5 different map documents that you use all the time. Well, within ArcGIS Pro, they've changed that and said, why go and have all of these different files when you're doing the same thing? You just maybe want to output it to a different output, or you want to look at it differently. So they now have what's called a project file. It's a single project that goes and includes everything that you're going to be doing with it. So you can include multiple types of documents. You can include multiple types of map layouts on here, all contained in one. So it's a transition from many different documents that you're dealing with to one document that you're dealing with. And that would have all your connections in here. That would have all your settings in here as far as how things are going to be represented. But there are some differences in here. For example, inside of here, there is multiple maps per project. So I can have many different maps inside of my individual project. For example, I can have here, if you'll note, I actually have 2 different maps on here. Maybe I colorize them differently. Maybe they're different data sets that I'm using, but those maps can appear on these 2 different map documents. The data sets can appear differently. For example, I might go and have a built-in base map on one of these. Maybe I have imagery behind this one. And then with that imagery, let's go and turn these off and turn this off on here. I'll have imagery on this one, and on here, I'll have just my data on here. And what I can do is I can go in and change where these things are located. I can also go and change how they behave. I can have them set up so that they are not linked together, or I can say link them together so that as I move one, it moves all of those, so that as I move this one here, it goes and moves around. Again, it's taking that old concept of being able to display your data against other data and against other imagery and expanding it, doing more things for it than what you could do before. All right, I can go in and say, well, maybe I can want to put that on the bottom here instead of on the same side. And as I move, I can move around. Or I can use possibly the old preferences and just put them one on top of one another and flip back and forth. You have complete flexibility in how you want to view them. The next difference is that inside of ArcGIS Pro, you have a default geodatabase. Now, this default geodatabase is set up so that all interim data sets that you create get stored in there. Now, the secret is that you used to have this in ArcMap, but you never really were aware of it. It used to create default geodatabases out there, and you could store it out there in one place. Same thing here, but there's a default geodatabase. Let me look at my Arc catalog that's built into ArcGIS Pro now. This is the Arc catalog pane, similar to ArcMap, but it's expanded and do more. And on here, I can have multiple data sets created and part of my project file. So let's say I wanted to go out and create, I wanted to go and add some additional data to my project. All right, I can go in here and let's say I wanted to add this data to my project. I can go and right click on there and say, just add that to my project. And when I go back to my project, I can see that that's now stored in the same, it's part of this project file. When I save it, it'll be there. It'll always be available for me. If I wanted to switch what default database I was using so that it would store these results in a different database, to change it, all I have to do is I right click on here and I say, make that my default now. And now anything I create, unless I specify where it's going to go into that default geodatabase. All right. Another key difference is that inside of Pro, there's no separate applications anymore. There is, in fact, just ArcGIS Pro. That's all there is. There's no 3D. There's none of that. It's all built in into that same application. So I had here the old ArcGIS, Arc catalog, or excuse me, the ArcMap, Arc catalog pane here. But there's also, for example, I can go and insert another pane, and I can insert, let's see, I can go and tell it to, I want to insert a map layout, a toolbar. I can go and tell it pane sets. I can tell it a specific Python window. I can do a new pane set here. Catalog pane, catalog view. This catalog view actually goes and opens up for me full Arc catalog inside of here. God damn it. So I'll cut that out. I just crashed it. This is 3.6.2 structure. And I could have inside of there a folder for everything that I have inside my project. And that includes my default geodatabase. It includes my toolbox, my default toolbox. I have a default toolbox here that may contain additional model builder tools or Python scripts that I want. And I can include everything that I want in here inside of this home folder structure. Default geodatabase, I mentioned that in fact, every project file includes a default geodatabase. The name of the project, the location of the default of the APRX file, the home folder, the default geodatabase, and the default toolbox for it. They're all included within a project and they kept maintained by that. So how do you go and add a geodatabase to a project? Again, if you go to the Arc catalog pane, you locate your geodatabase, right click on it and say add it to a project. And that will go and add it and make it available as part of the project. And then you can go and tell it you want to go and make it your default by right clicking and saying make it the default. It is important because every project needs a default geodatabase. Here. Project options. This is where you get some of these settings which are very critical to running ArcGIS Pro. So here's the first one. Here's one that anytime I have a client that I'm trying to teach how to go and use ArcGIS Pro, this is the first one I set. And under the display cache inside of here, there is a setting here in which it stores a local cache. Here's one of the difference between Pro and Max, or Pro and Map. In order for me to display, I can go and very quickly move around. And one of the reasons this is so fast is that it's actually keeping track of where I've been and what I've displayed on here. So I can quickly go back and forth between these displays. Well, in order to do that, it keeps snapshots, keeps a cache of that. And if I go to my project settings options, I can see that my display actually has that cache. And as I move around, it actually keeps building that cache up. One of the issues is it depends upon how robust your computer system is and how robust your video card is. This cache starts growing and growing and growing and growing, so that eventually it will get so large that it can't display through all of those others and show you exactly what you're doing while you're editing. The actual set for that is to go and tell it to clear the cache each time the application closes, and just watch this and make sure you want to have that cache to be somewhere around a couple hundred megs and no more than that. I've actually gone to some clients where their caches are over 8 gigs in size, and they were complaining about how slow Pro was. It was because of that excessive cache they were carrying around. So that's the first thing you want to do is you want to go and set your cache so that every time you get out of ArcMap, it goes and clears that cache out and begins to start recreating it as you're going and doing any editing. Another issue you want to look at is the project units, and especially this is with 3.5, 3.6, with both of those versions of Pro. Because what's happened is that the US survey foot has been deprecated and it's been replaced by the US international, or excuse me, not the US, the international foot. So that often what will happen is there's these two different settings. And you want to make sure that the default setting, which is the one that's got the radio button actually checked, matches up with the default settings for your projection. If I go into my projection here and look at my projection on my map here, I can go here and I can look at my coordinate system and I can see that in fact it's using US survey feet, or excuse me, US feet. And if I go to my project file and go to my options, go to my units, and go to my distance, if it turns out that I'm not using US feet, I'm using international, which is what this here, and I go and start editing, it will give me a warning. Give me a warning. It's not an error, it's a warning. It says the default setting for your units and the default setting for your projection are not the same. Now, realistically, that means that at 5 and 6 decimal places, there's a difference. But for most of us, we're not doing geodetic surveying. We're not looking at it that closely, or we don't have that level of precision. But just to let you know, you want to make sure that they both coincide and are the same now whenever you're going and making edits, and you'll go and you no longer will need that. This is US feet. Again, let me go back here and make sure I didn't make it worse. US feet. Yep, US feet here. All right. That's another setting that you never had to be aware of in ArcMap, but this is trying to help you in saying, be aware there's slight differences, and you might be introducing errors, albeit slight errors, but you might be introducing errors into your data as you're doing it. So again, it's warning you about those things that ArcMap was ignoring. It's warning you about these. Let me go and show you another setting that you may or may not have noticed before. It turns out by default, when you have a layer inside of, when you have a data set inside of ArcGIS Pro, by default, you are automatically editing it. And there's a setting that you may want to go and implement under the project settings options under editing, which says whether or not you want to enable or disable editing in here. And that allows you to go and enable and disable editing. I'm actually editing at the moment. And it actually goes and puts a button up on the Edit tab here. And I've actually got it onto my Quick Access tab here. And what that allows you to do, let's turn this off so we can see it now. Let's disable that. And when we go back here, note that button disappeared because now we're automatically editing. And that's a little disconcerting when you make this change because now you're automatically editing inside of ArcMap, excuse me, inside of Pro. But when you have that checked, it allows you to go and have that button to start and stop editing. Another big difference between Map and Pro. Inside of Map, you were only available to make edits against one workspace at a time. If you stored data in different shapefiles or different geodatabases, you had to go and start editing and stop editing on each of those. By default now, you can do it against multiple workspaces, against multiple data sets at the same time. So you start editing, you're editing everything that you're allowed to do on here. That's also in here. Here's another one. There's a light and a dark mode so that like me, I like to work in dark mode. Usually my office lights are out and it's darker in here so it doesn't glare on my eyes as much. And you can change this between light and dark mode. To do that, you go to the project options under the general tab. You'll see here application theme and you'll see light and dark in here. That allows you to go and change between light and dark mode. I'm not going to change it here because I'd have to go and re-log in and such. I'm going to leave it at that. All right. So that's another option that you have. It's always one that I recommend. Autosave. Autosave is another option built in. I liken this to, be a child at Christmas and pestering our parents for, or Santa Claus for a certain thing. And when we get it, we realize, well, maybe that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And it's the same thing with auto save edits. Auto save edits, you can set up how much time goes between your auto saves, how much operations might go between them. All right. And then you can also tell it whether or not you want to have a dialog to confirm that save. If you set up autosave and you don't set a dialog up, it's going to automatically save them for you. And you're not going to know when it was saved and when it was not saved, which is fine, except that undo won't let you undo things past the save. So just be aware that if you're used to editing a lot, you might want to not have on autosave edits for you. Another big difference when making this change, making this switch from Map to Pro is how you select things. Inside of Map, we would go and use our selector and we could select one thing. We could hold down the Shift key and it would go and select more things. And then if we wanted to unselect it, we could hold down the Shift key and select it again. Shift no longer does an unselect. It only does add to my selection. If I want to remove from my selection, what I have to do is I have to switch to a Control Shift to do that. So Control Shift removes it from my selection set. Shift Select adds it. So Shift Select, 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 and Control Select removes it from the selection set. Note, by the way, when I've got things selected here, another quick little tab is that down here on the very bottom of my display frame, I can see that there's something that says, oh, you've got 6 things selected right now. And I can go and zoom to that just by clicking on here. Previously, it was over in table of contents under your selection area. Don't worry about that anymore. Now it's right here in front of us, how many things you've got selected. And then you can clear it out if you want, so that, again, as part of the redesign of what the software that we use, Esri has looked at how we select things, how we don't select things, what we pay attention to and not pay attention to. And they've given us these widgets that are much faster than what we used to have in Map. Here's the selection. So there's a couple different keyboard shortcuts: Shift and hold to add selections to it, Control to go and remove them, Shift Select Press holds to select from the current selection and deselect all others when you want to go and just reverse everything. And then, so this is in the keyboard shortcuts area also. All right. Hardware and licensing. ArcGIS Pro is a 64-bit Windows application, and it requires 64-bit Windows, which means now Windows 11. No more Windows 10. And it turns out that there's some .NET framework that's being used by ArcGIS Pro that is no longer available for 10, so you must go and upgrade to Windows 11 on here. Just be aware that older computers that ran ArcMap fine may struggle running ArcGIS Pro. Depends upon whether you're doing any advanced things like any 3D, which by the way is built in, or what the video card is on it, that old desktop that you were using. I can tell you though, most modern computers will run ArcGIS Pro fine. But if you're going to start doing 3D and some more intensive things, you may want to make sure that you have good new hardware. And that's the reason why organizations may need to invest in hardware upgrades across their GIS team. There are higher RAM requirements, 8 gig of random access memory minimum. 32 gig is recommended. 64 is optimal if you're really doing 3D and you're doing a lot of intensive work on there. That's one of the area where there's an issue. Video card, your GPU, your graphic processing unit, you want to have a good video card inside of your computer. All right. There are more demanding processor requirements because ArcGIS Pro has parallel processing in it. It can do more than one things at a time, which ArcMap was always limited to. All right. So this allows you to go and do multiprocessor evaluation. It allows you to go and sort of do more than you would do before. All right. Licensing. There is different licensing, including you can have a named user licensing in which you're actually logged in as the individual user. Interestingly, ArcGIS Pro is not licensed to the computer, it's licensed to the user, all right, in which it uses individual license requiring authentication through ArcGIS Online or Enterprise. There is still some single-use perpetual licensing that's your machine-based, but it doesn't include some of the other user types that you might need to get. So you can do perpetual licensing, but it's not quite as easy. So how do you check and see what you've got? Whether your computer is sufficient to go and run this? Esri actually has a system verification tool to check to see. So what you want to do is you want to look for, download, and then run, verify your computer's ability to run ArcGIS Pro. And from a strategy standpoint, you want to prioritize hardware upgrades for users doing intensive analysis and working with large data sets. So even though you can run it on the same one, you just want to make sure that you set the computer level to the what work those people are actually going to be doing. And so if you're developing a strategy, you want to think about phased hardware upgrades that are aligned with the overall migration timeline. You want to plan though for frequent upgrade cycles to your database. Matter of fact, I've got a blog post that's coming out here in about a week that talks about we used to think that if we kept our computers around as long as we could, it didn't cost us any money. Well, the reality is it costs money, it costs time, it costs people if we don't upgrade our computers every so often. We need to get an upgrade cycle in place. Geoprocessing tools, if you're involved with geoprocessing and things like Python and scripting and model builder, just be aware that several of the geoprocessing tools have changed or been renamed or been deprecated. There is a geoprocessing tool called Analyze Tools for geoprocessing that will look at your models and scripts and tell you whether or not they have to change or whether they're acceptable to be used. All right, let's look at the data differences. So the first thing off the bat is that it no longer can you use personal geodatabases. This is Microsoft Access geodatabase structures. You can't use them anymore. There's some licensing issues, so it's a file geodatabase by ESRI or an enterprise geodatabase, but there's no longer personal geodatabases. And some of the newer versions, and you can see this coming out in 3.6 and 3.7 that's coming out soon, they have tools that allow you to take and convert personal geodatabases into file geodatabases. So there's some help coming up on how to go and do that. But right off the bat, don't plan on using personal geodatabases anymore. Different COGO structures. This is one that hits home for me because I do a lot of COGO work. Just be aware that, in fact, if you are dealing with COGO, coordinate geometry, attribute fields on a line layer, that in fact, those COGO values are no longer text-based COGO values. They are no longer stored as as text. They are stored as numbers. Numbers allow you to do analysis on them, whereas text only allows you to use that for labeling on here. The ArcGIS Pro is looking to become as much an analysis tool as a mapping tool. You can still create a label off of the COGO values, but matter of fact, it includes, if you've done it correctly, it automatically includes the ability to go and do that. But it no longer stores them as text. It now stores them as true numbers. Also, another thing you see here is you see this radius 2 field, because inside of ArcGIS Pro, you have the ability to go and approximate spiral curves, not just regular straight curves, but spiral curves also. These are the COGO fields. What's missing on here? You used to have side, you used to have the chord, and you used to have the central angle. They're no longer stored. These are the COGO fields that are stored and used on ArcGIS Pro. So how do I take my old ArcMap COGO fields and migrate them into ArcGIS Pro COGO fields? There's a couple ways of doing it. If you've got existing line layers, there's a tool that Jason at ESRI put together. Great tool. Here's a QR code that'll get you to that. Or you can just go out and look for Migrate ArcMap COGO to ArcGIS Pro. Jason's got a blog post up there. And you can download it and basically you tell it, here's the layer that I want to convert. Here's the layer that I want it to be called. And then you actually show what the fields are. And in most cases, you'll only have to go and change the angle or the direction field because there are certain iterations or certain releases of ArcMap in which they call the field differently. Sometimes they call it direction, sometimes they call it bearing, sometimes they call it angle. So you just want to make sure you're setting it for the right one on that. But it will duplicate that line feature class and create a new one. And then in that new one, all of the Kogo fields will be converted from text to numbers, and it'll have the values in there for the new numbers on here. So great tool. But if you are switching from ArcMap Kogo into ArcGIS Pro Kogo, you have to go and do that. All right. The other thing that changes is annotation changes. Annotation in ArcGIS Pro has a different structure than ArcMap annotation, so that you have to go and tell it you want to go and upgrade this data set so that you can use it inside of Pro. ArcMap annotation is viewable in Pro, but you cannot edit it in Pro. In order to be able to edit it, you must upgrade that data set. And when you go to upgrade the data set, because that is the geoprocessing tool to do it, it will convert it and it will overwrites it to go and it doesn't create a copy of it. It overwrites it on top. And just be aware that once you do that, once you upgrade it to Pro Anno, ArcMap can't read it anymore. So if you're planning on having both of these at the same time, you may have to go and copy that Anno and have two different sets of Anno in there. The next thing we want to talk about is scripting languages. VB Script right now, there's a very short interim time here in which it's initially available, but it's already, Esri's already told us it's being deprecated. It's not going to be supported much longer. Instead, they're using Arcade as a new language. It's the primary language for ArcGIS Pro interactivity, for labeling, for pop-up expressions, for calculations, for symbology. They use it for all over in here. Arcade is the replacement for VB Script, but I have to tell you from exposure to Arcade, um, it does so much more than VB Script could ever do on here. You can still use Python. It uses Python 3 instead of Python 2, and it's used for longer non-interactive geoprocessing process. So if you want to go and still code in Python, you can do that, but it's a slightly different variation of the language on here. So the benefits. Why should you move to ArcGIS Pro from ArcMap? One, ArcMap is no longer being supported. So it now becomes a liability that you can't, since you haven't upgraded yet, it becomes a liability. There will be no more patches on it. There will be no upgrades. There'll be no support on ArcMap anymore. So you're now being not nudged anymore. You're being pushed. You have to go and upgrade if you want to use Esri's products for your GIS. You have to do it. But there's advantages. Like that brand new car, it's going to do things for you. It's going to try to help you along the way. It will allow you to do things that you couldn't do before. There's that modern interface, ribbon-based interface with contextual tools that respond to how you're working. From a performance standpoint, it has 64-bit architecture and multi-threading. If you're doing a lot of intensive work in geoprocessing, it does wind up doing it large data sets faster on here. It provides 3D integration, built-in, seamless 2D and 3D together in one application, no longer having multiple applications on there. We didn't talk about this much, but there's cloud integration, better integration with ArcGIS Online and Enterprise and feature classes and feature services, much more enhanced on there. And then enhanced and advanced capabilities as far as the analysis and visualization and sharing tools that are built in here. This is where GIS is going, and this is why you want to move in there. And finally, future proofing. Esri is going to continue to develop ArcGIS Pro, and there's ongoing development. I can tell you that they are coming out with new releases almost every 3 months. There's almost 4 releases per year coming out of ESRI. They're constantly doing development on it. They're looking and fixing things so much faster than they ever did with ArcMap. So don't be afraid to go and upgrade. Just make sure you upgrade and get the latest bug fixes in there. So any questions? I'm looking at the chat window. I don't see any questions. So with that, I'm going to cut it out. And thank you all for attending. And please stick around. All right. Thank you.